As many of you know, the federal government has two branches of Congress. They have the Senate and the House of Representatives. These are primary legislators. They make the laws, they write the laws. Obviously, the president signs some stuff and has his initiatives on his own. And there's a large bureaucracy that I spoke of last week on the program. But we don't really think a lot about what ethics rules are in place in order to keep them following the will of the people, in order to keep them to the promises that they made us when we elected them and sent them to Washington. So one of the ways that we do this is to fundamentally change the way that we think about Congresspeople from kind of celebrities to public servants. Public servants need to be subject to ethics rules because they're making decisions on our behalf. And they're making decisions that either hurt us or help us. And by the way, the point of my saying all this is that Congresspeople should not make decisions that help themselves directly. So, what am I kind of getting at here? The point of this segment is to say that Congresspeople should not be able to own stock. What happens when you own individual stocks? Well, you're typically worried about whether that stock will increase or decrease, whether there's volatility in the market, whether you should sell or whether you should buy. Having these individual stocks changes one's behavior. And this is especially true if you're in a position of power where you can actively affect what's going on in the markets. In the special election in Georgia, where Raphael Warnock and, oh my gosh, I can't think of his name now. I can't think of the other senator's name. Okay, anyway, but you know who I'm talking about, the two newest senators from Georgia. The reason that they were elected primarily was because the arguments made against Kelly Loeffler and David Perdue were that, hey, they legislated in such a way that allowed them to reap lots of money because they cashed out their personal stocks right before the pandemic. They received these confidential briefings from the government that we were going to have to go into lockdowns, and immediately they sold all their stocks in things that would have been normal investments during the pandemic and moved them to online technologies and work from home technologies like Zoom, Teams, and the like. This is outrageous, corrupt, and unethical behavior. In theory, some of this conflict of interest stuff is already legal. The only problem with that is there's really nothing that enforces it. These people are not held criminally accountable. So how do we change the dynamic? How do we make it so that our politicians are less corrupt and so they have more of an incentive to do what we want them to do as opposed to make themselves rich? The way that we do this is we completely ban the owning of stocks by any elected official whatsoever, or any official who can change policy. So instead of just being elected officials who can't own stock, this also includes people who work at the head of agencies who should not be able to own stock. Because the truth is, if you're working as the head of the Department of Education and you have stock in private educational companies, well, you can direct policy such that those companies get very rich. You then make a profit and can sell at a profit. So we need to pass a law to ban all of those types of people from owning stock. Now, of course, that's going to be very difficult because it's very hard to pass a law against your own interests. So there needs to be a groundswell of pressure, both from inside of Congress and outside of Congress, to make sure that these individuals are not allowed to own 1 penny of stock. And by the way, if we feel that there has to be a better way to compensate our Congresspeople in order to make this a reality, right? We can make it a carrot and sticks, right? We can say, well, we'll increase your salary by whatever. Let's say, we'll say, look, we'll make, this is just an example, but we'll make the base salary for any congressperson $200,000. Right now it's $174,000, but we'll make the base salary $200,000, but you cannot own a single stock, nothing. And afterwards, after you get out of politicking, then you can own stocks again if you want to. But while you are in a position of power and privilege, you cannot own stocks because it creates conflicts of interest where you can possibly legislate for your own interests and make yourself richer at the expense of the people. And that is not why we sent you, on any politician, to Washington. That's not why we want people as the director of federal agencies. That's not why I want people in political appointments or cabinet secretaries. So it will be a difficult thing to do, but I think it's one more important way that we can fundamentally change the way our politics looks and feels, which is to simply say, if you're elected or if you're a policymaker, you may not, under any circumstances, own any stock at all.